apartment complex is an apartment. Inside that apartment resides a man and his wife in their 30s, their 1-year-old baby, and the wife's parents in their early 50s. At some point this morning, the son-in-law was cleaning the snow off of his car in the parking lot and heard a disturbance coming from his apartment. Again, inside the apartment, when the man was cleaning the snow from his car, is the man's wife, their 1-year-old baby, and his in-laws, or her mother and her father. Another 911 caller resides in the building nearby. She too heard a commotion. So 2 911 calls came in pretty close to each other, from the son-in-law, who's in the parking lot cleaning the snow off of his car, and from another occupant in the building. The son-in-law goes back into the apartment, finds his wife suffering from stab wounds, and seemingly, and again, it's early in the investigation, he enters the apartment and sees that his father-in-law is armed with a knife that I'll describe generally as a curved dagger. It's got about a 10-inch blade to it. It resembles, frankly, a meat cleaver, but it's a curved dagger with a very long blade. His father-in-law is armed with that, and he is stabbing his wife. He had already stabbed his daughter, and then the father-in-law turned the knife on his son-in-law. So there are 3 stabbing victims. The father/father-in-law stabbed and killed his daughter, and she's been pronounced deceased. He stabbed and injured his wife. He stabbed and injured his son-in-law. The wife and the son-in-law who were stabbed are in a grave condition, life-threatening condition, and they're being treated at a local hospital. Thankfully, the baby was unharmed. To describe this scene as bloody is an understatement. The damage and the chaos and the carnage that was perpetrated by this man in his 50s on his own family is unimaginable. So our police officers were dispatched to this chaotic scene, arrived within several minutes. When our officers made their way into the apartment, the father/father-in-law was literally in progress stabbing his son-in-law with that knife, with that curved, long-bladed dagger. Our officer gave repeated commands, one after another, to this perpetrator, the father-in-law, to drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife. Not only does he not drop the knife, but he still proceeds to stab the son-in-law. And again, the son-in-law is one of the 911 callers who apparently made his way back into the apartment to intervene, to save lives, I'm sure to rescue his baby. So our officer discharged his firearm and killed the suspect, the perpetrator, the knife-wielding man who had just killed his own daughter and had just stabbed brutally his own wife and brutally his own son-in-law. I can't imagine what was going on behind those 4 walls. Really great job, grace under pressure for someone to make a 911 call when a neighbor heard this commotion in progress. The turmoil that man was going through that would somehow compel him to stab in a really brutal way his own family member like that, I can't wrap my head around that. The loss of any life is something that we all take very seriously, and whenever a Fairfax County police officer discharges his or her firearm to save lives, and that's exactly what happened today. Our police officer was on the scene and literally in a life-saving effort tried to save the life of a man who was being stabbed to death by his own father-in-law. So that young police officer who discharged his firearm preliminarily, and I saw the body-worn camera, and our executive command team saw the body-worn camera footage, did exactly what we expect him to do, and quite frankly, exactly what our community expects him to do. So his grace under pressure, his bravery, his effort to save lives may in fact have done that. I don't know yet, because the son-in-law who was being stabbed by the father-in-law is still in grave condition and is being operated, I think, on right now. But that young police officer did what we expect him to do, and I will pause there and take any questions, and I'll start with Neil Augenstein.
Hi. Okay, so can you describe a little bit more about what the person who was clearing the car heard? Can you, I mean, you said it's disturbance, but yelling.
So Neil, it sounds like, if I understand your question, the son-in-law is like many other people in the community this morning, even right now, cleaning the snow off of his car, and hears something coming from the apartment. And again, it's the apartment where he resides with his wife, their baby, and his in-laws, or her parents. So he hears some type of commotion and rushes back into the apartment and is confronted by a bloodbath of a scene where his wife is stabbed, his mother-in-law is stabbed, the baby is present right in the middle of it all. You'll see that in the body camera footage that we release to the community after each and every critical officer-involved shooting or critical incident, quite frankly. So you'll see exactly what we saw in the body camera footage. It's clear to me that the son-in-law was in a position to hear something going wrong inside the apartment where he lives with his family, rushed inside to find an unimaginable scene of his father-in-law butchering his family. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just clarify, the victim that did die, was that the mother or the daughter? And were there any prior incidents to this residence?
So I'm sorry. So I should have made that clear. The woman who's been pronounced deceased is the daughter. So her father stabbed and killed her. There are no prior calls for service, domestic violence or otherwise, at this residence. There's no history with the family that we can tell at the moment. That's always something that we look into. But right now, there are no previous calls for service for domestic disturbances here or other crimes. Yes.
Chief, can you discuss, or are you going to name any of the victims at this time? Either this, obviously, are you going to name the suspect or the one?
Not at the moment. We have to make sure all the next of kin notifications are taking place. Right now, the only one of this entire family that's alive and conscious is the baby. So we have to figure out what relatives may be nearby so we can make those next of kin notifications. But like we typically do, either in a follow-up news conference or a follow-up press statement, we will make all those people known to the community and to the local media.
Can you also talk about just how quickly this officer had to act and how many years? You said he's a young officer.
He's a young officer with a couple years on the department. So imagine he's dispatched to this chaotic scene and there's two 911 callers, and he makes his way into this garden-style apartment. He goes down a set of stairs, and literally there is a bloodbath of a scene that made its way from inside the apartment to the hallway. So he sees the amount and the volume of the blood and knows that he's confronting, or he's about to confront, a life-threatening situation. And in fact, when he opens the door and sees the father-in-law armed with a knife stabbing his son-in-law, he still attempts his very best job to de-escalate, to get him to drop the knife. He refuses to do so. A life was in the process of literally being taken when our police officer discharged his firearm.
It was all in the front, like as soon as you opened the door, that was happening?
Yes.
And how many years has this officer had?
I think at least a couple years, but I'll get all that for you guys.
What happens to the baby or the 1-year-old?
So the baby, 1-year-old toddler, the baby to me, not harmed at all, but that baby's being looked at right now and cared for, and we have our Victim Services Division and Child Protective Services who are on the scene right now, just attempting to make sure that baby's safe.
To reach out to the family for whoever.
Yeah, all the things you can imagine that we're going to do to make sure that baby has a family to go to and is otherwise cared for. That's all happening right now.
The officer who first arrived, was he the only officer in the cruiser, or was there another?
So it was, thank you, Neil. There were two officers that were dispatched. As the two officers made their way into the apartment itself, obviously one officer is in front of the other. He was the officer who was repeatedly issuing verbal commands to get the man armed with this curved dagger, this meat cleaver, who was stabbing his family, to drop the knife. He refused to do so, and that's when he discharged his firearm. Yes, ma'am.
Is it a baby, a boy, or a girl?
You know what? You're going to make me guess. I don't know. It's a little baby, toddler, 1-year-old, but we'll get that information.
Do you know what time first call came in? What time you guys got here?
We're going to give you the whole timeline after I'm done just making these initial remarks.
And can you say at all what led up to this? Were they having an argument, or?
Now that's a great question, and you know, like a lot of family disputes and domestic violence and the things that happen behind the four walls of any home, whether it's a single-family home or an apartment residence like this one, we don't know yet what turmoil, what strife was happening in their lives. But I can't imagine anything would compel any human being to butcher his own family like he did today.
Are you aware time you had a case like this?
Well, you know, I nothing comes to mind, and I've been doing this a long time, as have all of us, that a person, a patriarch of a family, attempts to take so many lives in such a moment like this. So this, thank God, doesn't happen here or elsewhere very often. But when it does, it reminds all of us that domestic violence can start at a really low level and escalate really, really quickly. So for those who are in positions, friends, family, neighbors, or otherwise, that know that domestic violence is taking place anywhere, we encourage those folks to reach out to their local police department to get us involved to prevent a tragedy like this one from happening.
Is it known if the suspect has any kind of criminal history?
No, I don't know that now. We know that there's no history at the residence for calls for service or crimes or disturbances, but we'll be in a position, as you all will be in a position, to determine if in fact our suspect, once we name him, has a criminal history. But he's, I think, in his very early 50s.
Are you doing toxicology reports? I know that the suspect is dead, so is that something that you determine after?
Yeah, all those things take place whenever someone dies in terms of a murder or an officer-involved fatal shooting. So autopsies, toxicology reports, all those things are done routinely. And again, the Fairfax County Police Department, mourns the loss of any life, period. We wish we didn't have to be here standing to announce the death of anyone. But our officers are trained to intervene. They're trained to stop chaos and lives from being taken, and that's exactly what occurred here today.
Is there anything the public can do to help in this situation? I don't know if it was the guidance that you mentioned.
Yeah, well, you know, that's a good question. What can the public do to continue to help? Well, I think that happened this morning when a neighbor heard a commotion and dialed 911 and stayed safe while he or she made that call. So, you know, we're not asking for the community to insert themselves or put themselves in harm's way when they hear or see something that's taking place like this, but at least call us and get the police on the way. And we were here in a matter of minutes, and those two young police officers who are here did exactly what we expected them to do.
Sir, is this a newer family to the community? Do the neighbors seem to know them or have any relationship?
I don't know, and those are some of the questions that we have as well. So when we have a follow-up opportunity to interact with you all, we'll fill the blanks in. And again, it's our own self-imposed policy for the last several years. We'll release the body camera footage. We'll release the 911 audio, all those things, and it's our promise to the community to do that within 30 days. And we look forward to doing that, because transparency rules the day when it comes to these types of police actions that are unfortunately necessary from time to time to save lives.
And routine administratively for the officer who fired, or both the officers?
So the officer who discharged his firearm, he'll be on a modified duty status while this investigation takes place, and we work with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office to do that as well. But the services that are being afforded to not only the family and those who are impacted by this crime who live in the community, it's the same level of care that we afford our own police officers who are involved in these traumatic, critical incidents, because it's tough. In spite of their training, it's a difficult scenario for them to go through as well. So I appreciate you all. Thank you.
wife